I've recorded this video 3 times and hopefully it's going to be my last time. Okay. A very important video today. This video is going to be a precursor, a long precursor to my next few videos, all about how to pronounce all of the sounds in Irish. And that's all I have to say. I suppose I'll just jump straight into it. In my first video, I mentioned a few things about Irish consonants. I said that Irish has 33 consonant sounds, which is a lot more than English. Each one of them is part of a pair, one broad and one slender, and all 33 of them are different in some way to the English, except for the sound huh. From the spelling, as I've said before, we know that we can tell if a consonant is broad or slender based on what vowel letters it's written beside. If it's written beside A, O, or U, it's broad. If it's written beside I or E, it's slender. But what does it actually mean for a consonant to be broad or slender, to be pronounced broadly or to be pronounced slenderly? That's the topic of this video, and I'm going to get straight into it. In order to explain this, I'm going to have to explain, first of all, what a consonant is. People will say a consonant is anything other than A, E, I, O, or U. And that's true for spelling, but as I just said, we're not talking about spelling, we're talking about pronunciation. And when it comes to pronunciation, a vowel is an open sound. E, A, O, U, etc. Likewise, a consonant is any closed sound, any closure. So, B, L, Ng, H, R, and sometimes the closure can be more or less. Another thing I will need to explain this concept to you is explaining where these consonant closures can happen in the mouth. So here is a diagram of the mouth. As you can see, your nose and underneath the mouth, and going from front to back, these are all the different places that where a consonant can be produced. So you have the lips, the teeth. Right behind the teeth you have a hard ridge. Right behind that you have the hard roof of the mouth, which is called the palate. Next you have the soft back of your mouth, which is called the velum. Behind that there's the dangly bit at the back of your throat, and underneath that is your throat, and then at the very bottom of your throat is the glottis, or the vocal cords. So, 2 of those parts that we're really going to focus on today are the palate and the velum. So, when you say a consonant, if your tongue is raised towards the palate, right, that consonant is called palatalized. And this is what basically makes a consonant slender. If, when pronouncing a consonant, your tongue is raised back towards the velum, that consonant is called velarized. Naturally, you can tell it's the same word. And this is what makes a consonant broad. So, how do you do these 2 things? How do you raise your tongue to the palate, or how do you raise it to the back of the mouth? Raising the tongue towards the palate is exactly what you do in English when you make the sound y. So, when you make a slender consonant sound in Irish, what you're basically doing is slightly changing the position of where the tongue lies, right? And adding a little y sound to it. That's the main thing, adding a little y sound to it. Like some of the letters in these English words, the N in minion, the N in new, the M in music, the L in trillion, or the C in cube. You can tell that all of those letters have a little y sound following it. When you pronounce those, they're slightly more central in the mouth, so the mouth is always, the tongue is always in a similar position. And they are all called palatalized sounds, and that's what you need to do in order to produce a slender consonant in Irish. Now, raising the tongue to the back of the mouth, velarization, is one of the things you do when you pronounce the English sound w, as in want, along with, rounding your lips. So when I say w, I'm doing two things: rounding my lips and raising the back of the tongue. And this is what we want to get in order to make broad sounds properly. So naturally, if we can just say the sound w without rounding the lips, so w, that leaves us with velarization, or what basically is added to every broad consonant sound in Irish to make it broad. And if you can't do that, if you can't just unround your lips, go from w to w, I suggest taking your hand and forcing yourself to do it. So there aren't many examples in English of velarized sounds, except for in American English, and in some British speakers you'll find this as well, what it's called the dark L, right? So dark, broad, velarized, all means the same thing. The dark L in American English is the difference between how an American would pronounce the L in light, la 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 la, light, versus the L in, for example, fall. They say fall, listen, la la la, light, la la la, fall. And that is a velarized L. So if you practice saying w and then unrounded w, and practice a dark L, fall, you'll get a feel for what broad sounds usually sound like and what the position of the tongue is going to be for broad sounds in Irish. If you haven't noticed already, when IPA pronunciation symbols are used on Wikipedia or in my videos to explain Irish pronunciation, the text looks quite complicated, and there's a lot of this symbol and a lot of this symbol. Now you know, it's very easy to explain. This symbol is just the symbol for palatalization. So any consonant that comes before this is slender. And this symbol is just the symbol for velarization. So any consonant that comes before this is considered broad. Another important thing that is optional, that some speakers like to add to their broad and slender sounds, concerns the lips. So if you like, you can choose this whether you like it or not. For slender sounds, you can spread your lips to increase the pitch, right? Slender sounds generally have a higher pitch than broad sounds. So if I take a slender B, and I spread my lips, I get an even more accurate native sound, B. This spreading of the lips is actually what most English speakers will do for some vowels, like E, as in the word see, or as in the word cheese, which is why, when trying to get people to smile, we ask them to say cheese. So you already know how to do that. For broad consonants, the lips are usually neutral, unless if they're already made with your lips, like with these consonants. So these are already made with your lips. So when broad, it's absolutely okay to pronounce these with pursed lips. And honestly, you probably should pronounce them with pursed lips, like in the Irish word bui or in the English word moi. So you can pronounce these as bu, pu, fu, fu, etc. Right? Because w is probably the closest thing we have in English to a velarized broad sound, learners often like to add a w sound onto broad consonants where there actually is no w sound from native speakers, right? So they hear a native speaker saying something like gaeilge or coine, and they'll say gaelga and quina because they're trying to approximate that sound. But think of it like this. The rule is if it's already made with the lips, it's okay to round your lips or purse your lips. So b, p, m, f, whatever, are already made with the lips. So you can purse them as much as you like. But if it's not already made with the lips, like T, D, C, and G, etc., basically everything else, you should not make your lips round, right? So if you wouldn't say tw and dw for a broad T and D, why would you say qu and gw for a broad C and G? Is my message. The last thing that you can add to your broad and slender sounds to really drive home your pronunciation is glides, right? So for front vowels E, A, and slender consonants, the tongue is in a similar position, quite forward in the mouth. And for back vowels and broad consonants, the tongue is also in a similar position, quite far back in the mouth, right? So when one type comes directly after another type in any order, the tongue has to travel a long distance, and that can lead to a sort of transitionary sound, which is known as a glide, right? So I have some examples of glides here. You can have on glides, which are transitioning sounds coming from a consonant onto a vowel, like in the words bui, gui, and njart. So in bui and gui, it's a broad on glide, and in njart, that's a slender on glide. So a broad glide and a broad glide has a characteristic sound, and a slender glide also has a characteristic sound. It's very hard to pronounce these words without glides. I could give examples, but more likely than not, you're going to just hear these words being pronounced, and what I find is learners find them easy to replicate. So if I really tried without glides, it would kind of sound like bui, gui, and nart. So some people think that what makes a broad sound broad and a slender sound slender is just adding the glides. Not really. It does have to do with the position of the tongue. The position of the tongue will be slightly different to English sounds. So like, for example, a slender N is, even before you release it, even before you release the glide, a slender N is further back than an English N. So in English you have N, and if I don't release a slender N, you'll hear the sound already is different. N, n. But with a glide as well, it's very slender. It sounds like nya. And some examples of off glides, which is glides coming from a vowel to a consonant, are in these words. So if you have the word sail without a glide, that's perfectly okay pronunciation, but you can also pronounce it with a glide. So sail. And this word is an example of a slender off glide. Without a glide, it's still very hard, but I'll try. Doing. And with a clear glide, it would be pronounced doing. And you'll hear that a lot. So, to make some general statements about dialects, I find that off glides are generally more common in Munster. Broad on glides are stronger in Ulster, and slender on glides are a lot of the time stronger in the south of the country. So Connacht and Munster. But that is a very general statement. You will find them in every dialect to some extent. And I suppose that's all I have to say. I just wanted to get this video out of the way because in my following videos, where I'm going to explain every consonant and every vowel, I realize I will be repeating myself a lot, and I'll be using a lot of language that probably should be explained first. So, just to wrap it up. So, there's 3 things that make a broad sound broad or a slender sound slender. That is 1, velarization or palatalization. So if a consonant is raised towards the palate, it's slender. If it's raised towards the velum, it's broad. Second thing is lip spreading. A lot of the time you'll find that slender sounds have the lips spread, and broad sounds will have the lips neutral unless they're already made with the lips, in which case you can have them pursed. And thirdly, glides. Oftentimes when coming from a broad consonant or slender consonant into a completely different type of vowel, or the other way around, as in vowel into a consonant, you will get a sort of transitioning gliding sound, and you'll hear it all over the place. So now, shin. Slangval, more ganajdriv shit. See you in the next one. Please, God. Oh my God, I hope the audio works.